first off, I just really want to thank you, Abigail, for being here today and for having the courage to tell us your story.
Yeah.
So why don't we start at the beginning and tell us about life before the illness.
Before the illness. So I come from a home, two parents, my mom and dad, and they divorced when I was 2. When I was 7, she remarried an Australian, and so we moved to Australia. And so we lived there till I was 16, and I came back to Canada. My mom had been diagnosed with breast cancer in '88, and then I came back to Calgary in '89, and my mom came a month later. And then so I finished high school. I went to secretarial school, business admin and computers, got a job. A couple months after I got my first job, my mom passed away, so I was devastated. And then so I was first diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia in India. I had a mental breakdown while I was traveling there. So I was 24. I had my birthday in India. It was 1996. We traveled there from October till December. Basically, how it started, we were in a train station, and I heard someone swearing at me and saying all Canadians were awful and bad, and they were using swear words and they were cursing, and I could hear this voice, but I couldn't see. No one around me was saying this to my face, but I could hear it, and it was very loud and it was very direct. And I looked around and no one's talking to me. I'm just hearing these things, and I told my friend, and she's like, she didn't know what to do, and then we got on the train, and then we ended up on a bus to Rishikesh, which is up north, and then I started to decompensate. So basically, what that if I can explain that for me, when I decompensate, is I started having visual hallucinations. I started hearing the voices were starting, and they had started at the train station, but they were more prevalent at that point in Rishikesh where we were. So my friend had to, and another traveler had to convince me that we were going to a special place. They knew something was terribly wrong with me. They locked me in one of the hotel rooms for a while so they could figure out how to convince me to go with them. I ended up attacking my best friend on the trip physically. I hit her a couple of times. It was horrible, right? And then when I got to the hospital in Rishikesh, what they did was they medicated me with basically like Valium and vitamins. So they just brought me down to a level. I slept for 3 days. I woke up and I saw Natalie, and I saw the other traveler, that was a guy, Patrick, and I said to them, "Where am I?" And they're like, "You're in the hospital. You've been sleeping for 3 days. You lost it. You went crazy." And I was like, "Oh." And so drugs.
And up to this point, you didn't have any other symptoms?
No. In 1995, I was depressed and I was suicidal, and it was my mom's death was hitting me, and I was working, and work told me to go off and go on leave, and so when I went on leave, my family doctor put me on Paxil, but then I took myself off of it.
So what has been your most recent diagnosis then?
Well, back when I came to Abbotsford, I saw Dr. Katak at Abbotsford Mental Health, and he's very excellent. He knows his psychiatry, right? But he seemed to think that I'm two things. So I'm the bipolar and the schizoaffective, because I was honest with him. I'm like, I hear voices, I have delusions, not so much hallucinations, but the delusions are very strong, and the voices are very strong. And when he finally discharged me, the day he discharged me from his care, because I was doing well at this point, he was like, "You'll always have to deal with these voices. There will be no way to cure them. You'll just have to manage them in the best way you know how."
And what was that like, hearing that?
That was hard, because it was like, I need a solution. Like, I don't want these auditory hallucinations anymore. They're hard, because my voices, the way they talk to me, they yell, they scream, they curse, they belittle, they tear me down. And then sometimes they're very nice and sweet. It's like living with an abusive husband. It's a bit of a tough thing, right? So
let's talk about some of these delusions. So for somebody who has no idea what a delusion is, how would you describe it?
Oh, okay. So delusion is a thought or a scenario that I think about that comes to mind that is not grounded in reality. So it seems grandiose, it seems very fantastical, very out of this world kind of things that sound like, that single me out as having some kind of specialness that no one else has. And these delusions feed on on my need to feel wanted. The good voice that I hear will speak nice things to me and has never steered me wrong. But the delusions are like, oh, that I'm God, and that I created all this, and that the Bible was written a long time ago, and that I wrote the Bible, and that I wrote these words, and that my mother and father in heaven are controlling heaven, and that the other delusion that I get is that you will be the judge of others when the age ends, and that Jesus is this person, and that these people are reincarnated now because they were this person in the past. That's what I struggle with. That's the biggest struggle is the God complex things. I just want to be a girl that's living her life. I'm doing well in my job. I have my 2 cats. I have my apartment. I have my garden. I have my sponsor and my friends, and my family. That's it.
You have a job. You live on your own. You have your 2 cats. So let's talk about the stigma. So do you tell people about your mental illness?
Not always. That's sometimes depending on who it is, and it just really depends on who it is. Because some people don't want to get it, don't want to hear your story, don't want to understand because it's too scary, it's too much. But I frankly, when people see me, they don't see the bipolar and the schizoaffective. I would hope, it's not like people come up to me and go, so are you dealing with a mental illness? No one says that to me, right? But on the other hand of that is if I don't share my trauma, then people won't know that there is triumph over trauma. That there is joy in life, that I do find the beauty, that I do have hope, that I do believe that everyone is worthy of a decent life and love and a love of their life and animals and a nice home, that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that everyone deserves love, and for the basic to get to that love point, they need basic needs met, home, food, clothing,
And are those needs being met today?
Unbelievably so. I was on the streets 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago, and I was on downtown East Side, and I was doing things they're not of me who I am today, and not of me who I am when I'm taking my meds, when I'm getting enough sleep, when I'm eating well, when I have friends and family in my life. When those things are happening, then the sky's the limit with me, right? So, yeah.
Makes me really happy that you're doing so well.
It is, and I work at Communitas, and it's such I finally found my work family.
And I heard that you are a recipient of the Yes to Me scholarship.
Yes, twice I got that, and when I was going to U of E, because it's on the back burner right now. My goal was to be an art therapist.
Okay.
So I was working towards that, but as I found out, winter semester was just too hard. So I ended up, January, February, I get suicidal. I go off the rails, end up sometimes in the hospital or just having to cancel everything. Thankfully this year it didn't happen, so yay, so there is an improvement there. But I was studying psychology and visual art. I just couldn't get through winter semester. So I canceled the program, so my funding stopped. So the only way for me to get to school is to pay for it myself. But I feel like, there's no time limit on schooling. If I do it 10 years from now, that's okay. I know lots of people who are older who go back to school. So, not a big deal. Yeah.
Now, if there's somebody right now who they're wondering if they perhaps may have a mental illness, what advice would you give that individual and or the family that's trying to support that person?
Depending what's happening, access the resources in your community. So whether that means you reaching out on their behalf to the mental health clinic that's in your community, doing the research on the internet, knowing that that you may have to commit them to a psychiatric unit in the hospital. Sometimes getting the police involved and taking them by physical force. I just had this happen in July. I went psychotic because I was off all of my meds, and ended up in Abbotsford Psych, and it was hard. But a family member phoned the police on my behalf because of my behavior that had affected her. So without her doing those things, right? Like, family has to step up and maybe do the hard decisions to get you the help you need. And it's not always those things. Maybe if it's someone in your family or a friend, I guess just asking questions, right? And showing your concern, and don't do it by text or email. Like, actually physically, face-to-face, have a conversation, if that's possible. And also ask about the drug use too. If there's any drugs or alcohol, that's a major factor in how well you're going to be. I feel like people with mental health disorders, when they add the alcohol or drugs, that sometimes can amplify the harder things about the mental illness. So I went from working a very good job, taking time off, dealing with the suicidal and depression, went off the Paxil, and then the bipolar part, which we now know, where the mania started to hit. And so, and then the schizoaffective part came in when I got to India a few months later. So, it progressed, right? And so, but drugs were part of my story too. I was self-medicating on marijuana, right? So that did not help. But if you're worried about them, then get the resources done. Talk to someone knowledgeable who you know that maybe already has a mental health issue and they're stable, and you can go to them and say, what do you think about this person in my life, and get their advice. So it's just having a conversation, right? So, yeah.
And having that support system around it. But it sounds like you have a really good, strong support system around you, which is absolutely essential.
Yeah, it is. Totally,
have that.
100%.
And this is a tough one, Abigail, but you've touched on it a couple times, is the violence.
Yeah.
And let's face it, when we use the term schizophrenia or schizoaffective, and it's been a lot in the news lately, as we know. Let's talk about violence, and as much as you want to share about what's happened, and it's not you, and I just want to make that very clear. It's not Abigail.
No, it's not who you see today.
Yeah, it's the illness.
I guess I could talk about what happened last July. So once I got sober in May, I wasn't on any medication, no psych meds, no pot or pills, no alcohol. Like, it had been about a month. And so by the time end of June hit and July was happening and we had the heat wave, I went psychotic and I was doing kind of really unusual things. But this time around, it was verbal, a death threat that I sent to my cousin, right? And it's hard because when I look back to that, I know that's not who I am, but that's the darkness that we each of us keep at bay, right? When I'm stable mentally and when I'm sober, I do good things and I do the next right thing.
And that's the key. And that's what I want the media to know as well, is key. That if somebody is taking medication, then they're no more likely to be violent than anybody else.
And the funny thing is about medication, I've been on a lot in my last 30 years of mental health, because I was diagnosed with depression in 95, right? And it's now 30 some years later. And so, like, I've been on injections, I've been on antidepressants, antipsychotics, like a whole, seizure medication, a whole bunch of stuff. And they didn't find what would work this time until I ended up in the psych ward. And when I ended up in the psych ward in Abbotsford General, I had to be in the high acuity unit, which is where you're so in psychosis. It's the only safe place for you. And it's a very hard place to be, because inside those walls, it's like jail. it's very much like jail because you only get a toilet and a bed. There's nothing else, no pictures on the wall, nothing to harm you, and they lock you in there until they can get you to a point where you can be, quote, normal, you know, and act considerate towards others and not act out, because the other part of my schizoaffective bipolar is I will worship Satan, and that's really hard.
Wow.
Because I you know, I'm a woman of faith, and when I get into psychosis this last time around, I was worshiping Satan, and how do they treat me? They had to get security come in, hold me down, and give me an injection.
Yeah,
and
that would not be pleasant at all to be only to have this simple room, but at the same time,
it's the only safe place.
Exactly.
Only safe place, and it's the only way that they can deal with people who are in the high echelon of psychosis, because when you're in psychosis, your reality isn't what reality is, and I'm convinced if I do those bad things, then I'll be saving myself. So it's very confusing too. It's not all cut and dry, and that's the hard part, because when you're unstable in psychosis, having an episode in when you're schizoaffective is that sometimes the voices chime in and they sound good. They can conceal themselves in goodness, and you think what they're telling you is the right thing to do at that time, and and they sound like they make sense, so you just go, oh, okay, I'm going to do this,
right?
Because that makes sense. What is bad seems like good, and what's good seems like bad.
Mm-hmm. So when you are experiencing psychosis, how do you tell the difference between the voices in your mind and reality? Is there a way to tell for you? There's no. Abigail, that would be so incredibly difficult.
Yeah. No, I have to be arrested. I have to have authorities step in and take me to the hospital, because I won't go willingly on my own. But when I think back to these things that I've done, that have happened to me, there is an awareness, but not enough of an awareness to go, I need to stop this and get some help. Because psychosis is sneaky. It makes you feel like what you're doing is right. It's very deceptive, and it convinces me at the time that it's okay.
And that's why we need those experts and psychiatrists and police and treatment and medications to step in and be able to assist at those times.
And to have some compassion and just to be gentle with the person, because you don't want to antagonize them, right?
Right.
And it's hard, because I know when I get stable and I wake up from the fantasy delusions I'm having, and that they're not consuming me, and I wake up and I'm in the high acuity unit, and I go, oh, here I am again, you know, because I've been in and out of the psych units since India, so from 96 till now, and it usually happens once a year.
So it's a journey.
Totally, yeah.
So what's next for you, Abigail?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Well, getting my license. I can work for that goal. Getting my N and driving would be the really cool thing, and just maintaining my job, because this I'll have to. Can I share a little bit about the job?
Please.
Because I just started in November. Finally, by the time end of July hit, I was stable again on olanzapine and doing good things, going to meetings every day, talking to my sponsor, reaching out and reading the Codependent No More book. And then the vocational counselor I have, Bonnie, she got me the lead to the job at Communitas. So I applied, got on to reception. By the time 11 weeks were in, I got a promotion that I applied for, and now I'm the admin assistant for home share and child youth respite and adult respite.
Congratulations.
And then I'm still at reception 1 day a week. So for what happens next, you know, honestly, I just want my life to keep going the way it's going. That I hit my year cake on May 28th, that that all the people that come to celebrate, can say things that they've seen change in a year, that I can be encouraged in my faith and my church community, my church family, really, but and that I get to do the things that I've been dreaming about that are based in reality, that aren't these grandiose delusional ideals, that I can drive to California and see my uncle and my sister that I've never met my sister, so that would be a cool thing. Going to Calgary to visit my mom's grave, that's another goal I have too. And maybe doing some traveling when I get my first week of paid vacation in over 30 years. So,
Wow,
there
that's
are
huge.
a lot of just normal, I want to just have a vacation, drive, hang out with my friends, keep doing my gardening, I love my cats, and just be good. Just be good.
There's something so beautiful about simplicity,
Right?
isn't there?
Totally. I just want a simple life, no bells and whistles, Boy. Yeah.
Abigail, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
You're welcome.
Your transparency, your honesty, your openness, it takes a huge amount of courage to speak out. And we need more people like you who are willing to share their story.
Yeah.
We have to find a way to normalize schizophrenia and serious mental illness, and we need to keep talking about it. Thank you for having the courage to speak with me in this beautiful park today.
Well, thank
and
you for the
your openness.
opportunity. Yeah. I'm very thankful that I got to share this, and now, now everyone will know what I've done, whatever, I'm not ashamed of the things I've done. I'm saddened by them. There's a difference, right? That was part of my schizoaffective disorder and the bipolar. It's not who I am today while being stable on meds. And that's the key. When you stabilize people on the right psych meds, and everyone has their own combination, but once they find what works for them, then they can lead lives of goodness. So, yeah.
Can I give you a hug?
Yes!